Hello, everybody. This is Conrad Sokolowski with Tom Baker, and welcome to the platform. This is episode 4, and we're going to get into some discussions here. And if you haven't listened to our previous episodes, the introduction is just fine, but I definitely don't think this needs to be listened to linearly. And eventually we're going to start recording too with video cameras. We're right here in front of a wood fire, and we're going to jump right into it. First and foremost, let me just ask Tom, how'd your day go so far?
Pretty good, man. It's interesting. I don't know how far this will go, but if you're asking me genuinely how my day went, I'll answer you genuinely, which is dovetails off of what we were talking about on episode 3.
Right, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me answer you genuinely. It's funny because I'd promised my kids that I would eat lunch with them, which is something that I like to do consistently. Go to my kids' school, they eat lunch back to back. So, I can spend an hour there and have lunch with both of them and kill two birds with one stone, as they say. So, I haven't done it in probably 2 or 3 weeks because of a new job that I got in Upper Arlington. So, there's quite a bit of a drive from Johnstown. So, I intentionally didn't go in this morning so that I could stay home, do some stuff around the house, and then go in for lunch. And when I got there, my 8-year-old Conrad, he was like, "Dad, hey, can we go in the bathroom?" And he's like, "I need to talk to you." And I'm like, "Sure." And he just started bawling. And he's just like breaking down, crying. And when he gets emotional, he can't talk. He's so choked up, he just can't talk, which is the same way I get, so he gets it naturally. And he was like, "I'm just having a really bad day, and, I feel like the teacher's pushing me too hard, and I got in trouble for something that she misunderstood me." And so anyway, he's like, "Dad, can I come home with you?" And it's hard to say no to a crying 8-year-old that you love. So I was like, "Yeah, sure." And it's interesting. What I would say to that, not only am I answering how my day went, it went great. We got to spend some quality time together. But it's just an interesting talking point, which is not intentional. Like, I didn't mean to bring this up, but since you asked, it's interesting, like, how you have to be flexible with your day. Like, there was a moment there where I could have been real irritated because I had plans for the day, right? I had told my customers that I was going to be doing certain things, and they all got switched up somewhat out of my control. You could argue that I could have left my kid there and I could have gone about my day, but I didn't. And so I made the most of it, though. Like, instead of getting upset that all my plans got foiled, whatever, I made the most of it and had a good day with my son and played games and, like I said, made the most of it. So anyway, do you have anything to speak to that? Like, how do you handle when you have plans and they don't go your way?
I find that what you just said, I find it interesting because I was thinking to myself while you were talking how I don't necessarily have that. I don't run into that issue the way you do, because you have family members and they are in need, and so you have to pretty much always drop what you're doing to tend to their needs. And so I find that interesting because that is being very selfish. Selfless, right? You're very selfless in the sense that I mean, look, there are dads out there, right, who say, "Sorry, I just don't have time. I gotta do this," and that's it. And then the kid grows up to be, "Hey, where was my father? He's never there," and they have resentment and whatnot, and things get weird. But actually, I have a question for you. How do you feel? Because I know you just asked me a question, but my question to you, real quick, I'd like to have answered first is, how do you feel really ultimately when, I mean, because obviously you would do anything for kids. Like, there's nothing that comes before your kids. Am I right or am I wrong?
I mean, I wouldn't spare a Klondike bar for one of my kids,
Okay.
but anything outside of that, which I think any parent would agree with, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume,
That's- I mean,
right? So
Klondike
you would
bar.
lay down your life for your kids, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so that's sacrifice then. When you tell yourself, "Hey, this weekend I'm gonna go, I don't know, do whatever. I'm gonna do whatever and have work on something I've been working on, or have me time or whatever." And so, but then your kid says, "Hey, can you do this with me? I really would want you there," and all that. And so now you have to sacrifice what you wanted for somebody else, and it's very what they call altruistic, right?
Yeah. What was your question though?
Well, here's my question is, do you see that as a sacrifice? Is that something that you ponder a lot and say, "Man, if I mean, do you ever think that, like, oh, if I didn't have kids, I'd be able to do this and this and this," or is that maybe something you thought about but not anymore? What's the answer to that question?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think every parent, and I can't speak for every parent, but I think I'll speak for myself. Yeah, there are a lot of times that I ponder life without kids, but there's never a time that I would trade my kids for a life other than the one I have now. Not ever. I mean, that's not a realistic thought. It's fun sometimes to meditate or to fantasize or daydream about life without responsibility. Really, what it comes down to is that responsibility. I mean, you're on call 24/7. You are, required, or at least you, to some degree, required to do certain things for your kids, right? Provide for them, clothe them, feed them, shelter them, pick them up, take them to places, extracurriculars, all that. And what that creates is responsibility. So there are times, and not only does it create responsibility, it also presents restriction naturally, right? I can't go certain places at certain times because of those restrictions. So yeah, to answer your question, I can't remember how you phrased it, but I do think regularly about life without my kids, but at the heart of it, not being superficial, not answering like this because I'm on a microphone being recorded, but at my core heart of hearts, never ever would I even consider trading my life, even when it was the crappiest, with kids, for a life that may look better on the outside or may seem better, from the grass is greener on the other side perspective. Never in a million years would I trade the life I have with my kids now for a life differently without them.
I have a few more questions for you, actually, if you don't mind, so that I don't lose my I don't forget them. Which one do I want to go with first? Okay, let me go with this one. Can a person be noble without responsibility? Is there such a thing as nobility without responsibility?
What's the definition of nobility?
Well, I would like to give you let me give you a Google definition of it, so that I don't butcher it with my own interpretation. Are you doing it too, or just me?
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Or are you over there?
The state of quality of being noble, nobleness of mind.
Having or showing fine personal qualities or high moral principles and ideas. Synonyms: righteous, virtuous, good, honorable, honest, upright, upstanding, decent, worthy, noble-minded, uncorrupted, anti-corruption, moral, ethical, reputable, magnanimous, unselfish, generous, self-sacrificing, brave. Well, self-sacrificing, so that's interesting because I think maybe I was veering towards that. Because I mean, there's a lot of synonyms here, and I think the one that stands out most to me is the self-sacrificing one, because I think, to play along with what you're talking about, is self-sacrifice. You're sacrificing you are sacrificing a lot of your personal desires and needs to be there for your kids. So I guess my question is, do you think a person can be noble without self-sacrificing? And noble would mean, these other things too. Virtuous, good, honorable.
Well, to answer your original question, having that working definition, I don't think you could be noble without responsibility, whether it be kids or not. I think responsibility creates good things and good characteristics in people. Now, here's the thing: the need to be responsible is not the same as being responsible, right? That's a given. So just because you have kids and you need to be responsible doesn't mean that person is going to be responsible. So having said that, somebody that is responsible because they have responsibilities, the more responsibilities that somebody is responsible for and is effective at being responsible, I think the more noble they would be. Because, and here's where I'm coming from. That may not have made a lot of sense, but here's where I'm coming from. Having kids made me instantly grow up, right? Like, having kids and having that responsibility made me such a better person right off the bat, because you do have to sacrifice self for your kids, right? You have to sacrifice social events, whatever, certain things that you like to do. So, and what it does is it creates discipline and self-control. And those are two great, good characteristics. So, and I'll tell you this as well. And I don't wish this upon anybody, and especially myself. But in hindsight, I don't know if I should say grateful or thankful, because I don't want to it's almost a contradiction to say I wouldn't wish this upon myself, but I'm also grateful that it happened. But the divorce caused me, the fact that now I'm raising my kids on my own half the time, right? Like it's when I have them 100% of the time. So I have to care for them 100% of the time. So that made me even more responsible of a person. I mean, if I was, let's just say, just for fun, let's just say I was like 15% responsible as a human being growing up. When I had kids, I moved from 15% of being a responsible person to 40%, maybe 50, right? And these numbers may not be accurate. They're just for fun, but 50%. Well, when I moved from married to divorced, I went from 50% down to 15 again because I was depressed, backed up to 85. I mean, now the things that I do for my kids and how responsible I am for them, as far as I have to now wake up and make sure my little kids are wearing the right clothes, right? I didn't have to do that when I was married. I have to make sure they are bathed I have to make sure my daughter brushes her hair in the morning. I have to feed them breakfast. I have to get them to school. So the responsibility doubled because my wife had half the responsibility in that regard.
Yeah.
And so I am such a better person because of those responsibilities, because they create discipline and self-control. And the more you have of those two things, I think the more you can accomplish in any field.
What would you say? I do have another question that is in the back of my mind, but one just popped up is what is your opinion of those who choose not to have kids, couples even? I know people that are close to me, they have decided that they will not have kids ever, and that's it. It's just a husband and wife, and there are a lot of people like that, and they go on and they go the rest of their life never having kids. What's your opinion on that? Do you think everybody should have kids? Do you think it's not for everybody? Do you think life isn't just all about having kids and that's it? Because you're coming from the perspective of a father who has 4 kids. And so when you, with that picture in mind, like an older couple with no kids, what do you think? What's your thought on that?
Well, to each his own, right, to a certain degree. And that question is, I have to answer it in 2 different perspectives. One is a biblical worldview, right? Like if I'm going to answer that from a biblical worldview, I would say that kids are, they're a blessing from the Lord. They're a gift from the Lord, right? So having said that, the person that doesn't want kids, it's like they may be thinking that they are gaining something, but in reality, in my opinion, they're missing out on something. And it's almost like, I don't really feel this way, and I would never feel this way for anybody, but it's almost like if I heard a couple say that, you could almost say, I feel sorry for you that you don't want that, because you'll never experience the one joy that nothing will ever take its place, and that is the love, the unconditional love that you get from your children. But now, so I answered it from somewhat of a biblical worldview, but Tom Baker, just answering that based on my knowledge, and a couple comes up to me, my friends, and they say, yeah, we don't ever want to have kids. Good for you. Don't have kids. Awesome. Go do you, and go travel and have fun and get to know each other and be the best like spouses to each other, and don't have kids. That's awesome, because kids aren't for everybody, right? Like, now again, I get that may sound like a contradiction on
yeah, because I was gonna say at first, like, well, if kids are one of the most irreplaceable irreplaceable experiences on Earth and as a human, then it almost kind of should be for everybody almost a positive obligation, not a negative obligation, but you should be desiring kids because maybe, doesn't everybody have that? Doesn't even the person who says they never want to have kids, do they not have some kind of itch in the back of their minds where it's like, well, if maybe, but I really, really don't think so. Or people so set that they're trying to, maybe they are 100% accurate in their opinion, or maybe they're trying to suppress some things. Yeah. Well,
so, okay, here's my thought. And this is the thought that I had the entire time I was answering that question, because I knew that was going to be a perspective of some of our viewers. But here's the thing. You can't take kids back, right? Once you have them, they're in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And kids are the most valuable thing on earth, right? Like there's nothing more valuable than life. And you think about any movie that you've ever seen, or any, teachings, morals, etc. Like kids are the ones that are saved first, right?
The innocent kids,
yeah,
pure innocent.
Yeah. So like if there's if the world's coming to an end or whatever, it's like, let's save the kids. If there's, if you have one hand and there's an old person on the cliff and a young child, it's like you save the child, right?
Yeah.
So so kids are precious, and you can't, once you have them, you can't undo that. And so if you take those two facts or those two thoughts into consideration, and then you look at the world around you, yeah, it seems like it should be natural for the parent and kid relationship to be positive. But man, why is it possible for some parents to neglect their kids? Why is it possible for some parents to abuse their kids, to do awful things? Why is it possible for grown-ups to do bad things to kids? And if it's possible, and you have a couple that says, you know what, kids aren't for us, that's fine. Good for you if that's what you think. Now, I can sit here, and I don't, like I said, I don't do this, and I do know couples that say that. I could sit inside and be like, I just feel sorry for you, because I'll tell you what, I mean, look right here. I'm showing Conrad right now the background of my screensaver on my phone. This is Chloe, and she is wearing my clothes. Chloe's 7 years old, and she's wearing my jeans and my work t-shirt right after she got out of a bath. Her hair's still wet, and she just did that willy-nilly, like nothing. And that right there, that picture got me out of some of the deepest, darkest depression that I've ever faced. I was sitting in my driveway one day, and I was questioning, like, what is life, man? Like, this is horrible. This sucks. Life sucks so bad right now. So miserable. And just my music was on in my truck. My head was on my steering wheel. Nobody was home. I just got home from work. And I started scrolling through my pictures, and I saw that picture. And I feel like this is worth sharing, but immediately I was like, what the F am I talking about? Like I got out of myself, and I was like, who the hell do you think you are? Like, look at this. Look what you get to have. Like, that's my daughter. Like, what am I complaining about? Like, what do I have to even complain about? Like, I have 4 healthy kids. Like, why would I even begin to say woe is me for anything that I'm going through? And so that right there, that joy that I got to experience in that moment, which is just one, tip of the iceberg, a moment of joy, only comes from having kids. That unconditional love that you can have with nothing else but a child. So a parent, a person, a human being, and we could argue this all day, and we could have other podcasts about this, and we could find out what science says about this, but I would make this bold statement and say that nobody could love to their full potential unless they had a child. Because the love that I had prior to having children pales in comparison. It doesn't even compare to the love you have. And you can ask any person with a kid, and they will say, yeah, I get it. I would never argue that with anybody. I would never try to convince them of it, because it's something you got to feel. Even parents that want to give their kids up for adoption, but then have them and then can't, because they're like, oh my gosh, that love that I have, And I'm not saying that happens every time, but so that is one thing that humans that don't have kids don't get to experience. But I will touch on this is, when we ask these questions, or when you ask these questions, and when we talk about this, you have to think about also those people that want kids and can't have them.
Yes, that's a tough one too, huh?
Yeah. So,
but then there's adoption. So you think that people who adopt can love an adopted child the same way, a parent who's the same way a biological parent or a parent with biological children feels towards them. Do you think that's possible? Because, I mean, you don't know until you ask somebody who's adopted, right? And then
I have 2 adopted children.
Oh, that's right. You do have two adopted.
So
Wait a minute, then. You're the perfect person to be talking to. That's right. I totally.
isn't that awesome that you forgot? That is such a compliment.
I don't
to me.
see them as adopted.
That is
to me, they're just like your kids.
They're not. They're not. They really aren't. And I get upset when people are like, "Yeah, but they're your stepchildren." I'm like, "No, they're not."
Okay, so yeah, so Tom has 4 kids. He's got 2 that he married into, right? Cameron and Kaylin.
Yeah.
They're 15 and 16, right?
They're 16, and Kaylin will be 17 next month.
Okay, and then Chloe and Conrad.
Yeah. 7 and 8.
Are 7 and 8, and those are your biological kids.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you don't feel. There is the love different between your adopted versus your biological?
Yeah, it is.
It is different.
It is different.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think you can.
You can't say like, oh, I love biological more. It's just different.
It's just different.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I would never not do for one child that I would do for another. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So if Kaylin were hanging off a cliff and for some reason I needed to, that's not a good scenario. If Kaylin were in front of a bus, if Kaylin were in front of a bus and I needed to push her out of the way, but I knew I was going to die, I wouldn't hesitate more. What is so funny?
More than 2 microseconds.
Yeah. But if Connor and Chloe were in front of a bus, it'd be 1 microsecond. No. But that's the God's honest truth is if one of them were in need and it required my life, to sacrifice in order for them to live, it wouldn't be even a question of hesitancy because, oh my gosh, they're not my biological kids, right? The love there is the same. Like I would do the same for any one of them. But at the same time, there's also like a learning. Like I love and appreciate my kids so much more and differently than I did when I first adopted them or when my little kids were first born. Like my biological kids, I had them from birth until now. Mm-hmm. My older kids I had from like 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so I missed a good majority of their toddler and infant years. Yeah. Not a good majority. I missed all of that. Mm-hmm. And that, just for me, and maybe some parents can explain this better, but for me, those years are some of the funnest years. Mm. I mean, and it really sucked for Cameron and Kaylin because they couldn't articulate that. And to this day, until they have kids, they don't understand. They may look at the situation and be like, oh, dad loves Connor and Chloe more or differently. Mm. But what they don't understand is that right now they're younger. I spent a lot more in different time with Connor and Chloe than I did with Cameron and Kaylin because of their infant years and their toddler years. Watching a kid learn to walk and talk and like Connor and Chloe will come up and hug me and kiss me and tell me they love me for no reason still. Mm. Cameron and Kaylin don't do that. Right? And it's not because they don't love me. It's because they're older. Yeah, and so here's the thing. I can say this definitively and with a clear conscience. I love Connor and Chloe even differently now than I did when they were infants. Mm. Like I'm already starting to see now Conrad is 8. He's starting to have an attitude. Mm. He's starting to rebel a little bit, like I have this ongoing fight with him. He won't wear pants. He will not wear pants. Mm. Okay. So when it's 4 degrees out, he will not wear pants. And Brittany and I have agreed to not make him wear pants because he throws just this huge fit, man. It like rocks his world. And we're like, you know what? That's fine. If he doesn't want to wear pants, and it's not like we're outside for 20, 30 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
So if he wants to have cold legs for the sake of like not having that feeling on his legs, then that's fine. But but Chloe wanted to go sledding the other day, and I couldn't go sledding with Chloe without taking Conrad. So I made Conrad put snow pants on over his shorts. And the trade-off was, hey, if you do it and you go down one time and you don't like it, I will walk you back to the house and you can stay in the house by yourself, and I'll continue sliding with Chloe because the house wasn't too far away. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, he ended up going down one time and making me take him back. For real. So, but my point is this. It is spending time with him now when he has an attitude and he's not as like affectionate and like clingy to me is not the same feeling or emotional whatever as it was when he was a kid. And so if I could articulate it in a different way, it would kind of be like this. When you are dating somebody, you have that romance at first, that spark, that honeymoon phase.
Right.
And then when you get married, then true love starts to take over. And then, we still good?
Yeah.
And then you love both by feeling and knowing, right? And so it's you could ask anybody that's been married for over 7 years what it's like, and they will tell you, it's much different than the first 2 years of marriage, etc.
Right.
The love hasn't changed. Anybody in their right mind, I would argue, would say that their love is more mature now than it was then.
Right.
And it's blossomed and it's greater, it's stronger, but you might not see him kiss as much or be as affectionate as much. And so that's how I would that's kind of my roundabout way of articulating how I love Cameron and Kaylin versus Connor and Chloe. Not more or less, just different.
Yeah, okay. I want to ask you a hard question. You don't have to elaborate on it too long. I know it's going to be hard. And maybe it's not. But when you and Brittany went through your divorce, did you out of either anger or aggression or jealousy or whatever the emotion, feel different towards Conrad and Chloe, your biological kids, versus Cameron and Kaylin? Was there any kind of difference? Because I'm assuming maybe there was some, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you guys went through the divorce, there was some anger, resentment towards one another. And so did you at all feel like Cameron and Kaylin were kind of hers at that moment, or not at all?
No, not at all. I actually
I don't want to say possession because that sounds hard, but
I get it.
You know what I mean?
So I hear exactly what you're saying. I understand I feel like I understand the question and its heart level, like where you are, what you meant by it. And I will say, as far as this probably doesn't make sense, but it's almost like I didn't associate them with them being Brittany's versus being mine. And my whole take was like in the front of my mind, I was thinking, if she tries to get some type of different custody for them than the little kids, I'm going to fight it.
Okay.
With a lawyer. I'm not taking less time with Cameron and Kaylin than I am with Connor and Chloe because they're more her kids. That's not by law. My name's on their birth certificate. I'm their father. I identify as their father. They call me dad. And that,
but you truly felt like these are my kids.
Yes.
It's not any different than Cameron and Chloe.
Exactly. But I will tell you this.
Conrad and Chloe.
If I'm being completely transparent and honest, there were definitely times where in hindsight, I feel so sorry for Kaylin, and I try to, compliment her, as often as I can on how much I appreciate what she did through the season of divorce. But there were times where I resented her characteristics that resembled her mother.
Oh, interesting.
They are so much alike.
Oh man,
I mean, they
their
are.
laughs are like.
Oh my gosh, dude!
couldn't
They
tell
look
difference.
alike. They act. They wouldn't say that probably, right?
Right,
Like
right,
they would.
yeah.
Caitlin would be like, "I am nothing like my mom,"
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Brittany, she's like, "I'm nothing like my mom."
Yeah.
And you know how it goes.
Right.
Yeah,
Everybody does that.
yeah. And so, and I'm like my dad. I get it. But the thing is, there were times where Kaylin would be real negative and critical of me. I'd have an idea and she'd shoot it down with some negative, and they weren't necessarily unrealistic concepts that she was coming with or whatever. It irritated me, and I may have taken anger and bitterness that I had for her mother out on her.
Yeah, interesting.
But definitely was conscious of it after the fact and like tried to make amends for it.
So you were quick to realize that you were in the wrong and that you didn't prolong that, so that
it was never like a season of resentment just in the moment. Like and there were times where I was like, you don't act like your mom, don't be like your mom, you're acting like, and that got to her. It irritated her. Nobody wants to be called their mother, if they don't identify with their mother. And so so yeah, and I'm not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect dad, so I screwed a lot of things up. But like I said earlier, about 10 minutes ago, I love Kaylin and Cameron so much differently now than I did them, and I'm talking about a mature love. Like, man, I want to spend time with them. Love, like, I cook them breakfast every morning now, and it's a way for me to spend a little bit of time with them before I'm like, I had this epiphany, like they're going to be gone in college in 2 years.
Yeah.
Like I only get 2 more years to spend with them and do traditional type of things. And so, yeah, it's a great question. It's a great concept. And you know what? It'd be great. You had mentioned, Conrad, before we started this about traveling and interviewing people or getting more people on the podcast.
Yeah.
It would be so good if somehow we circled back to this conversation and we asked other adoptive parents
that'd be good.
their take on it.
Yeah, and I it's interesting when you were talking, I didn't know exactly where I didn't know exactly where we're gonna go, but I felt like that'd be some interesting. It was just interesting, and I generally wanted to know that.
But what's super fun about that is I started the conversation off by you started the conversation by asking how my day was, and I started about saying, hey, when you have somewhere you want to go, you have plans, and then they don't happen the way you want. Like, how do you handle it? And here we are talking about, like, we never talked about marriage, adoption, love, and here we are 40 minutes later talking about this.
Well, it's interesting because when, like, we hang out a lot and we do things together, and then, because we grew up together and we spent our super young years together, and then our teen years and all that, and now when we get together, it's still like kind of nothing's really changed. But you have a family, and it's interesting to kind of dig deep into that. It's like, man, let's get the perspective. I want to like hear your perspective on it, and so I find that interesting. And so I did want to ask you one more question. It was actually one of the original ones, and then I went into like a bunch of other ones. But when I was asking you earlier about when you think about what it might have been like not having kids, like what your life would be like and stuff like that, and then you said, well, you daydream and you like to use your imagination, but it's not worth much because you can't change the reality. My question to you is, how extensively can we use our imagination? Because people say, oh, you got to get in touch with reality. Oh, get your head out of the clouds. See, and this isn't about marriage or having kids anymore. I want to talk about like this as a kind of just as its own thing. I mean, and if you need to incorporate kids, it's fine. But really what I want to get to know your opinion on, yeah, we do have imaginations and we do envision and we do like to project into the future and we do have ideals of ourselves. Now, here's the thing. What's your thought on that? When is daydreaming okay? When is it necessity? When is it excessive? And when is it not good? When is it good? What is your generalized thought on that concept? When, because really, man, if we're not allowed to imagine and daydream and even be fantastical in our thinking, in our imagination, then aren't we really just reduced to a life of just the very rigid, structured, just life? You know, it's like almost the, you can almost even think of it as like the everydayness, the mundaneness of just getting up and going and doing, and then just doing responsibilities and that's it, and just responsibilities and that's it. And it's like, is that life? Are we allowed to imagine? When is it too much? What's your thought on that?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, and you probably have more to say about this than I do, but it's the science, the very science behind the idea that when you imagine and you're daydreaming, it is as if you are really there as far as your body is concerned.
Right.
So, you know, if you are in a state of mind where you're imagining a time where you were on a vacation and felt great moments and you're bringing those back to your memory, or if they didn't happen and you're creating them in your, you know, in your fantasy or whatever, I think science would say that those are actually, your body is stimulated in a way as if it was really there doing it right then and there in that moment, right?
Yeah.
So to that point, I would say that daydreaming is a good thing to a certain extent, right? Because it creates a positive energy in you and a positive flow, a state of mind, perspective, etc. I would say that the only time it becomes unhealthy is when your motives are bad, like if you're using it as an escape, right? Like if you're
Gosh, don't we all do? I mean, isn't that quite prevalent nowadays? All with social media, video gaming.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, isn't so much of life living it through the imagination rather than harsh reality?
Yes. So I'm so glad you said it that way. Here's a phrase that, tell me what you think about this. Imagination is bad when it becomes your reality. Okay? Do you understand what I mean by that?
It's if I were to say that, like, imagination is bad when. I'm sorry, say that again.
Imagination is bad when it becomes your reality.
So like if imagination is bad when you are always imagining,
yes,
and that is your reality,
yes,
rather than never manifesting.
No, never living in the reality.
Or being able to differentiate and say, okay, this is just imagination. I can just do this every now and then, but I need to be back in reality, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
because reality is what's real here now. You know, as you perceive it to a certain degree.
But then that also doesn't mean, hey, don't use imagination at all. At least use it to the point where, I mean, because look, there's a couple ways you can use it. You can use it. One, imagination is good when you realize a positive imagination. But imagination is negative when you, like you just said, when that is your reality. When imagination is just your reality and not actually manifesting.
Well, what I meant by that is, okay, let's do this. Tell me if this works for you. Let's take the entire concept of imagination.
Can you just hold that right there for a second? I'm going to fix my... Keep talking.
Let's take the whole concept of an imagination and daydreaming, okay? Let's take those two terms and concepts and put them into this word picture. The word picture is what is that? What is it called when you on those TV shows when you hook up to the reality or the I just lost it. When you hook up to something and you get in a simulated world,
Virtual reality.
virtual reality. Okay, so let's take the two things, daydreaming and imagination, and let's couple those together, and let's act like every time that you do those two things, you are hooked up to one of those head masks,
Right, yeah.
and you're in virtual reality. Okay. And then every time that you are not daydreaming and not imagining things, you're out in the real world.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I would say is when I said it becomes bad when imagination is your reality, it becomes bad when you are working in reality just to get to virtual reality.
Got you.
And
Got you.
you are like, you're making ends meet in reality so that you can get time to live in virtual reality because that's your new reality. Like you don't like the reality that you're living,
Yeah.
and so you're escaping. But the thing is, that's when it becomes bad, is when you're living over in the virtual reality, right? You're spending all your time there. But other than that, to put on the virtual reality mask and have a good fantasy or dream of, your future, whether it be goals and ambitions, or, you fantasize about the one that got away, or, what life would be like if you would have done something differently. Like, I think those things are fine and probably good for, for the mind, body, and soul to some degree. It's when you can't differentiate between the two, right? And you're so stuck in the fantasy and so stuck in the virtual reality that you start forsaking the reality. Because here's the thing, like this path that you and I are on, we're finding out that you can manifest your own virtual reality here in reality.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we don't have to have that virtual reality, man. We can be living it right here and now.
Well, that's the thing. I almost have a disdain for virtual reality because it's false.
Yeah.
And if you live, and see, man, this is why things like social media, video games, or even movies, excessive entertainment, that is, you are constantly stimulating your neurons through something that's false, and then you become addicted to it, and then so you go back to reality, and you're with, for lack of a better word, bored, because it's not as stimulating as the false world that was created for you. All right, so Tom had to run to the bathroom real quick, but we're back. I just don't want it to sound odd when it just cuts from one thing to this. But so yeah, we're talking about the imagination and how what's excessive, is it good, is it bad, why, and because the reason why I thought about it, because I was thinking about you as a father who we were talking about self-sacrifice for your kids, and how when you are responsible for others, such as children, your own children, you have to have some sacrifices, because you might plan something, you might plan your day, you might plan a weekend, and you might have to change plans to be able to fulfill the needs of a child. And then we were talking about how it's fun to daydream certain scenarios where, hey, maybe if I didn't have the responsibility as much as I do, or what would it be like if I could just blast off for a week or a month and just do whatever I wanted. But you can't stay in those daydreams too long because it's not realistic. And so I took the topic towards imagination and daydreaming to what is, and see, look, we can take, and this is a whole nother conversation, but then you think about people like the Wright brothers. Then you start thinking about people like Howard Hughes and aviation. And then you think about even modern day people like Musk and Bezos and those guys who have this imagination, have this idea, and then they manifest it. And so it's like, oh, is it at what point in time was that person supposed to say, hey, I got to get off this imagination, I got to get back to reality, because what I'm thinking of right now is kind of a far out there idea, and I got to reel it in because I got to face reality. But thanks to these guys and gals, we have things like amazing technology and awesome online platforms that help a lot of people. So that's kind of like what I'm talking about, and so maybe it's like, hey man, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't become an irresponsible person. Maybe is that the right way to say it in your eyes? Like, hey man, daydream, imagine all you want, as long as, number one, you don't become irresponsible towards those that you're supposed to be responsible towards, and B, so long as that you are working to realize it rather than just living in a virtual reality by excessive daydreaming and never realizing it. There's one quote by Henry David Thoreau. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's something along the lines of this: if you have built for yourself castles in the sky, your work need not be lost. There they shall remain. Now go and build foundations underneath them. Something like that. What are your thoughts on that?
So, well, real quick, and I want to get your opinion on it. I think that we have to differentiate or distinguish between the two types of daydreaming. One being fantasy,
Like escapism.
yeah, and the other being a literal dream that you have, an ambition that you have.
You mean a conscious dream? Like you're like me and you right now could be dreaming like, oh man, one day I would love to
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But in
there's
both of those states of mind, as far as daydreaming, conscious dreaming, there's this idea of fantasy, right? Like,
well, isn't that fantasy though? Like if I'm dreaming of, let's just say that it's 1985 or whatever year it is, and I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great to have an online platform where people could buy?
no.
How's that not a dream? How's that not daydreaming?
No, I don't think that's okay. However you want to phrase it, that is entirely different than somebody sitting here with 4 kids and thinking, oh man, what my life without them would be like.
Although you could have that,
Yeah.
right? So you could say, hey man, what would my life be without 4 kids? And then just be like, okay, I'm leaving them.
Well, no,
Adios.
come on, that's not-
No, I'm saying that's not. It could be a reality. It may not be a healthy one, but it could be, right?
It could be, but then and if that's what you're saying and that's the way you want to take it, then let's distinguish the two daydreams between one being a conscious goal that you have and you think about it all the time, you actually want to manifest that goal and you're working towards it, and then the other is just an escape.
Right.
You don't actually have any desire for that to come true.
Got you. It's like that's
A fantasy.
a fantasy.
That in my mind, like, it's some guy that's daydreaming about having 2 girls at once. Right. You know what I mean? Like maybe he is that type of immoral person that would be like, that would flesh that out. But, he's just in the moment dreaming about it because it pleases him in that moment, versus somebody that's like, Steve Jobs, and thinking about computers. And
but somebody could have went up to Steve Jobs and said, hey man,
yes,
this idea you have is a fantasy, dude.
Yes.
Or the Wright brothers, listen, you guys, like, it is a fantasy. You're not going to be able to lug that thing up in the air and fly.
Exactly. But if when you're talking about that question in light of those two different perspectives, I think it's great and healthy that you maintain that realistic fantasy of a goal and accomplishment and have the ambition to do something great, because as history would tell us, those things are tangible, like they can come true, right? If somebody if you would have told somebody, or if you could not convince somebody that the telephone was going to be a reality.
Right.
You could not convince somebody. I remember, Conrad, in our day of age when the video phone was a
Yeah,
thought.
yeah,
Like,
right.
oh, you're going to be able to see people that you're talking
How
to.
funny is that?
And I thought, yeah, right. There's no way. And now we're riding around in electric cars, flying to the moon, and we all have iPhones,
Yeah, yeah,
and we FaceTime each other.
yeah.
So like, man, if you have a fantasy as far as that is concerned, a realistic dream, and by realistic, that's very subjective term, right?
Yeah, that's another.
But if
yeah.
you believe it's real and you think it, don't give up on that.
Yeah, yeah, I
Right?
gotcha.
Like if you are dead set on telepathing or teleporting,
yeah.
I would be naive and ignorant if I said that's not possible.
Yeah.
Because
And why do that though? Like, why limit yourself?
yeah,
Anyway? Say,
why
hey,
would
man,
I say that's not possible? I mean,
Right.
people say that, that people today are like, yeah, it is possible. That's how Jesus ascended to the heavens. He didn't do anything that we're not capable of doing. You know what I mean? Like, so like, that story was 2,000 years ago, people disappearing, and now we're talking about teleporting, right?
Yeah.
So like, so I just want to make that difference between a healthy daydreaming on a mission that you have and a goal, and yes, that still can get unhealthy, right? If you spend too much time in that and not working to make it happen.
Right, yeah.
But I still think it's okay and semi-healthy to have those fantasies where you're daydreaming about how, like, for me, for example, it might be girls in the past. Like, oh, what would life have been like if I would have gone down that road, and then lived in that fantasy for 5-10 minutes, and then gotten out of it, and
Yeah.
and been like, okay,
Whatever.
Whatever,
It's
that's
over.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see.
I think it's a good place. I mean,
Yeah, I think we're good. So I guess I could just take another couple minutes and again, kind of recap the aim of this, because this could be somebody's first time listening, and who knows, maybe you've listened to the other ones and you get the idea of what's going on here on the platform. I'm just going to take a couple minutes and explain again, just in case. We're coming from. Let me speak for myself, and then Tom can say. And we mentioned this in other episodes too, but the point of this is to connect with people and to for ourselves on an individually to be healthy minded and be whole. I always mention the word whole because I feel like that is the best word that describes the feeling, a very positive feeling, and I know what it feels like to not be whole, to feel lack, to feel inadequate, feel like you're missing out, undervalued, that you're not a part of something. Look, there are a lot of people out there who I feel are doing just fine. They're whole, and maybe they don't need anything other than just the basic things in life, or a family, and just maybe work, and just have a lot of friends, and that's cool. That's one type of person, and that's what brings them wholeness. And then for somebody else, it could be whatever else. And then I feel there are also people out there who are going through a tough time and are in search for something to bring them to a point in their thinking and feeling and spirit that there is something much greater to be here for. And there really is something way bigger than ourselves. And part of this platform is to talk about things that just keep us normalized so that we don't go nuts, because things can get pretty nutty. And so we look to the things that are maybe we look for the simplest basic things in life that keep us going and happy. But then, and I think, and we are going to get into this heavier in other episodes too, is start talking about some really big concept things and really get our minds out there, but in a positive way. And because there's a lot out there, and we can get really smothered with just the simplest things in life, which is fine, which is really good sometimes to have, because if your mind's out there for too long, you can go a little crazy. So it's good to be able to walk into a coffee shop, grab a coffee, and have a simple conversation with a stranger, or just to get aggravated in line because you got to be somewhere and you can't, you don't want to wait 3 more customers. But there's little aggravations like that are healthy. But then, man, I know I have, and there are probably some people out there right now who have gotten a point in their lives where the little things no longer do it for you. The simplest things aren't keeping you healthy and whole, and you need to find something bigger and better. There needs to be more out there for you, and that's what we want to talk about, and that's what we're going to talk about, and where we aim to go with this thing. And so yeah, I wanted to say that real quick, and I'll give the mic over to Tom, and he can add a few words too.
Well, just as a final thought to piggyback off what you said, and I don't know why I feel the need to say this. Maybe it's for my own ego, but as something that we mentioned for the first time, and we may mention this several times, we're doing this for ourselves. We are doing this first and foremost for our own wholeness and wellness and sanity. And what I mean by that is, every time, correct me if I'm wrong, Conrad, I don't think I'm exaggerating, but every time that Conrad and I get done with a recording, or even me, Conrad, and Aaron, we sit and we talk about how great that was, how good we feel. And there are times where our last recording, we went on to speak for about another, hour off the recording, about, the same topic or a little bit further in the topic that we were just talking about, because it edifies us. It makes us complete and whole.
Yes.
And because of that, we thought, well, maybe this will help somebody else.
Yes.
And so if it helps somebody else, that's great. If nobody listens to it, that's great too. And so the reason I think it's important that we articulate that is because we don't want to come off as some people that are trying to sound like they've got it all together.
Exactly, yeah.
Or that we're trying to fix you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're trying to fix ourselves.
The broken can't fix, right?
With the blind leading the blind.
Exactly. No, but it was funny. You mentioned, I think before we started recording, that I think you looked at one of our previous episodes. You said, "Oh, it's got 11 views," and it's funny because I think mutually our reaction was, "Okay, who cares?" Because we don't really care in the sense that we're not doing it for a massive exposure or to get a bunch of likes or to get a big following. Honestly, we're doing this because it's doing something for us, and if at the same time, like Tom just said, if it can benefit anybody out there, then fantastic. And that's why we are recording it, because it may touch somebody and it may help somebody out, and that's a great positive. Because I know that when I am in time of need, I reach out, listen to things, and I say to myself, man, I'm glad that they did that. I'm glad that this person has a podcast or took the time to write a book. There's some people who had some incredible insight that really helped them, and they didn't necessarily need to go out and write a book, but they did. And okay, so maybe they made some money at it, whatever. But the thing is, man, thank God that they wrote it and took the time. So that's what we're doing, and we want it to evolve. If that's where it's led, then great. But yeah.
Yep, that's all I gotta say. And when we saw that video with 11 views, we both were like, "Oh, that's 10 more views than I thought it would have."
That's right.
To your point, on a serious note, I bet you I could write a few dozen people at any given moment in my life and say, thank you so much for that profound nugget of insight because it changed my life.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
Like I probably don't still listen to those things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I can tell you, I mean, I know 3 or 4 of them right now, pastors, and sermon illustrations and preaching points that have literally changed my life, changed my perspective, and got me out of something. So that's another reason why we record.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll continue on. Have a good night.